The sound of God, oh, is to be sounded in the evening for at least 20 minutes. If a note is missing in your energy field, playing it on an instrument or reproducing it through the voice allows your body to replicate the missing vibration for itself. All vibrational healing works with this principle. You can heal emotional traumas through toning, which means your body can heal itself through sounding a tone that is missing. This is one of the primary reasons toning is so important. This is the principle behind the radionics and EMF machines that broadcast the vibration of a specific body organ that you may need. There is no right or wrong way to tone. Be willing to allow your vocal cords to open and sound an open vowel. Use your voice in a way that is different from normal speaking or singing. Toning exercise. Begin with one of the easiest practices. Get into a comfortable place, such as the bathtub or a favorite chair, and as you settle in, let yourself make sounds. Do not worry about how it sounds or what emerges. Take your breath in through the nostrils and let it out with your mouth, allowing it to run over the vocal cords. It feels perfect in the moment. It allows you to fill in the gap of whatever is needed in the moment. Play with this. Find your bliss. Experiment. If you are timid, start your toning experiments in the shower or bathtub. You might start with the 5 vowels, sing at any pitch and play with the rhythm. If you have a Tibetan or crystal bowl, play that first, and then make sounds to go with it. After a while it will feel completely natural. There are other times you will feel the natural urge to sound, when you are singing along with a song or when you are happy. Go for it. If you are not a singer, it is especially important for you to sing louder than you might be accustomed to making sounds. Why? You may have been told or felt your sounds were unacceptable, so you have held yourself back from singing. Singing louder gives you more practice so you can make up for lost opportunity and benefit from this. Hathor chant. El Kalim Om toning is the language of the Hathors, and the Hathors channeled this chant to me. It turned out to be a powerful Egyptian chant, so I began to include it in my advanced Flower of Life workshop. After I'd worked with this Egyptian chant for more than a year, a student informed me that it was found in a book titled The Hathor Material. This was a complete surprise to me. Although I was familiar with Tom Kenyon's work, I had no idea he had written about this in a book he co-authored with Virginia Essene. Years later I found a recording in Egypt by an Egyptian woman that explains the chant's ancient Egyptian origins. This is not the only Egyptian chant that has been given to me without my prior knowledge or experience. Since I am an open channel, information comes to me not through channeling but through direct knowing. I decided to write to Tom asking for permission to use this Hathor chant on my recording, since he had published before I did. He was traveling, but I had already begun rehearsals and was about to schedule the recording studio, and the Hathors were adamant that I move forward with the project. Ultimately I followed their guidance to finish the recording. I became a woman with a mission. If I couldn't get his permission, I would make it available for free. All summer I kept working toward completion and emailing Tom's office multiple times. The master recording was finally done and I sent a copy of the master CD to Tom's office that fall. Both Tom and Judy Sion, his partner, listened to it. At long last he gave his permission and secured Virginia Essene's permission as well. Even though he doesn't give endorsements, Tom told me that the Hathors told him this CD7 would have its own momentum and would not need any additional help from him. He was right. I get many requests for this powerful CD, and it is one of our best sellers. Here is an excerpt from the Hathor Material about the words in this chant. In our worlds we have sounds for each of these 4 sacred elements. El is earth, Ka is fire, Lim is water, and Om is space, or air. These 4 constitute a vibrational continuum. It is possible to chant the sounds of these elements and enter the archetypal reality in which they exist. It is as if these sounds open the door of perception and allow you to move into the resonant field of consciousness where the archetypal reality of the elements is alive. Indeed, entering into that realm and staying there for a while enables you to shift consciousness and perception in such a way that you sense the profundity of the physical world and also its place within the continuum of consciousness. I asked the Hathors to give me a way to remember the elements in the sequence used in this chant, since it does not match the familiar way we say earth, air, fire, water. They showed me a volcano in Hawaii. As we approached this mountain volcano they identified it as El. Then we saw the fire coming from the volcano, Ka. Lim was the gentle rain that followed. And Om was the wind that swept it all away. You may find this visual helpful when chanting El Kalim Om. Several years later I learned that legend has it that the Hathors live in a volcano on Venus. The 4 lower bodies. The 4 lower bodies are physical, mental, emotional, and etheric. They exist around the body in layers. Each of the 4 lower bodies has a specific purpose, and we work with them in such a way as to allow the pathways of information and experience to be open and congruent. When the bodies are lined up, coherent, connected, and communicating with each other, you are in alignment. It is important to understand the true link between the 4 lower bodies and the elements of earth, air, fire, and water. As we engage our energies to clear these basic building blocks in creation, it is helpful to accept the stage at which you presently find yourself. This will help you to move your awareness into this chant. If you do your part, the point of awareness shift will be handled by the Hathors. Physical body. Our physical body gives us permission to be in the manifest form. Your physical presence is the result of what you did as an etheric being when you moved into agreement to embody. The physical body is the expression of that agreement to express in matter, where we get to co-create, in matter, by the very distinct experience of being human. Mental body. Deepak Chopra, MD, estimated from his research that the average person experiences 60,000 thoughts a day, yet only 10% of those thoughts are about the present moment. How can we create the present if our thoughts are stuck in the past or future? The mind uses the mental body to go to the future and discover, oh, this happened in the past, therefore I must protect myself or I will be afraid because this may happen again. Here is my potential for the future. A clear person can feel all of this and then think, I can incorporate the past and the future and create a new future. It is the mind that goes through the machinations, and sometimes it's like a locomotive that cannot stop. This is why clearing out the pranic tube and learning to tune to the elements will enable being in the present, the most important event of all. Etheric body shape. You may sense your etheric body shape if you have an out-of-body experience and still observe your body. Your etheric body is home to your chakras and is your link to your higher self. The etheric body resides energetically just outside of the physical body. The etheric body is part of the body not yet in manifest form. It is your first link to your higher self and is comprised of energy that is in touch with source. Emotional body. Next, going outward around your body is the emotional body, which is the receptor of all your emotions and may access past emotions through memories in the mental body. Emotions are energy that holds a purpose or feeling. Emotions reside in the fascia, or connective tissue. When the same emotional wound occurs, the fascia retains divots that accumulate more of the same wound. The Orion series oils lift and dissolve these stuck emotions. The intention disc reformats the stretched out fascia like spandex returning from the laundry. Ascension tools make easy work of clearing your emotions. The emotional body immediately links to the past. It says, this has happened before. Then recognition sets in. The core elements of earth, air, fire, and water all manifest through the emotions. Think about how you use these elements when your emotions become escalated. Originally, creation wanted a way to explore these experiences after they had been felt, thus the emotional body was born. Memory is a good thing, but the captain's log of emotion became a miasma of feeling that could be accessed all too easily, replacing the present with its counterpart in the past. It also was not understood how deeply humans would feel emotional pain. Clearing emotional wounds is essential. Until we clear emotional wounds, our ascension process is limited. The Merkaba heals the wounds, however the process can be accelerated with additional emotional clearing. Even Lord Krishna himself, star of the Bhagavad Gita, promised to deliver us from our emotional scars and hurts. 8. He promises to help you with any childhood or other experience that is painful and difficult. Devotion to him is easy through singing mantras and bhajans to him. His request is to visualize him standing over any past wounds or traumas, in this lifetime or any others. Ron Holt, former president and director of Flower of Life, now closed, was visited by Krishna in a meditation during a particularly difficult time of the full history. Once you are visited by Krishna, you will never forget him. His body is distinctly blue in color. He is usually seen driving his chariot. Toning to clear the pranic tube. Emotion is energy in motion. It is chi or energy that is qualified with a memory. However, it is energy that is caught in a web, tied to time. Emotion must be felt to be cleared. This is why unexpressed emotion is so dangerous. When your pranic tube is completely clear and resonating, the pure elements, emotions, come and go. They can be deep or wide, but they are in motion. This is as it was intended. Be prepared for some interesting things to occur when you do this chant. Setting the stage for the Hather chant. This chant creates the link from your own awareness into the archetypal reality of the elements, as is practiced by many indigenous peoples. If you babysit, you become aware of the needs of a baby. If you connect with the archetypes of earth, air, fire, and water, your vibration will reflect more authentically the needs of the earth. Take this occasion to spend time in nature. Embrace air, sun, fire, water, and earth. Appreciate them. Allow your awareness and consciousness to become attuned to the 4 sacred elements. I can promise you they will let you know how much you are appreciated. When singing the chant a cappella, unaccompanied by the CD or other music, you can keep track of the count with an outline of hash marks on a paper you have prepared. This way you can focus more fully on the chant. Chant the names of the elements in a state of reverence and discover that an inner world opens far beyond your imagination. Be aware that the Hathors may cause you to feel like you cannot move. Their energy may freeze your physical body while they work on you and clear your pranic tube. Don't let this frighten you, instead say, thank you. After completing the chant, take an additional 10 minutes of complete stillness and silence. This is quite profound. There may be additional action from the Hathors during the still time. What happens during the silence is almost as powerful as the chant. It has been a wonderful experience for thousands who have participated. It is quite amazing to do it in a group setting. As a result of entering this inner world, the archetypal world of the elements, you are even more deeply connected to the natural world around you, and you will experience this world with new comprehension. You will see and clearly understand that the earth itself is a sacred temple, and wherever you go, God is. This new comprehension is so profoundly different from our third dimension experience that attempting to describe it fails to provide you with knowing what to expect. Be prepared to be changed forever and love the rest of your life. The Hathors ask you to chant 4 times and only in repetitions of 4, for example, 4x, 8x, 16x, and so on. The Hathors show up to work with you in groups of 4, one in front, one behind, one on your left, and one on your right, which is why they prefer repetitions of 4. Ideally, you would recite this 4 to the 4th power, 44, which totals 256 repetitions. You'll be happy to know we have done the counting for you, so using the mantras for Ascension CD, first track, allows you to really get into your toning. This takes about 22 minutes on the CD. It most likely will take you longer when you do it alone, as the singers on the CD keep the pace going. Another benefit of 256 repetitions is that it allows human consciousness to settle and move into the archetypes of earth, fire, water, and air. When that occurs, your perception of the elements is crystal clear. You feel their aliveness and they feel your humanity. The Hathors love you to do this chant out of doors where you are interacting directly with the elements. It is also useful to purposefully put your attention on your pranic tube. With your attention on your pranic tube, the prana, God's white light, moving through it becomes attuned to pure essence and activated by your sound. This then activates the elements of earth, fire, water, and air in you. Uprooting the unconscious. The Hathors, through Tom Kenyon, clarify points about negative emotional material, as follows, *9. Another thing to understand about this chant is that material from the unconscious very often begins to rise up, because consciousness settles into a very deep and profound state. One can experience every state of consciousness, every state of awareness from absolute boredom and fatigue to high states of ecstasy and bliss, including an awareness of one's own demons, one's own negative emotional material. All of this can be activated as one chants this chant, so it is important to understand that whatever arises while you are chanting is part of the clearing. By chanting the chant of El Kalim Om, a person is, in our understanding, acknowledging the sacredness of the elements, acknowledging the continuum of consciousness from the source that you may call God, through its various subtle levels all the way into the earth itself. Rest assured, you are clearing Mother Earth, too. Here in the physical reality, which could be the densest sacred element level, one is affirming and acknowledging the earth as sacred, one's body is sacred, and one's place in the continuum of the consciousness that one may call God is sacred. It has been said that the body is the temple of God. We agree that your body is a sacred temple, for it is the space in which the 4 consciousnesses of earth, fire, water, and air, space, offer themselves to you in service. The Hathors have more to say about personal consciousness. We see Earth as a sacred space, an outpicturing of the sacred elements of the archetypal realm of consciousness itself. We see Earth as being as close to God as any other reality, for the continuum is whole. Whether one experiences oneself as close to divinity or separated from it has nothing to do with whether one is on Earth, embodied or not. One's view is something that is held in personal consciousness. It is possible to be in deep communion with the divine, to feel completely at home in consciousness, and still be in a body. It is not necessary to leave Earth in order to go home, for home is a state of consciousness, a state of connectedness generated from within yourself. Create a link to the elemental kingdom. The Hathors have asked us to look at our modern culture and address a problem experienced by many of separation from nature. I make it a habit to be outside in nature every day. Although taking a walk up the street is good, it is not what is meant here. Try to find a natural area, perhaps a park or nature preserve, that has no electrical power lines. Let this special time help you connect with the elements, the elementals, and more. Let the elemental kingdom hear your appreciation for the abundant beauty of our planet. One of the most important things this chant will do is link you to Mother Earth and Father Sky. I found that after using this chant almost daily for about a year, my connection with animals and the earth elementals made a monumental leap. I could hear and communicate with them. I was given other gifts as well. A daily practice of this chant for an extended period of time will really open you to this. In addition, it actually helps the elemental kingdom harmonize with the human kingdom, as you are literally singing their song. The chant also links you to the elemental kingdom in other ways. In addition to being connected to the primary elementals of earth, air, fire, and water, there are personality-based elementals. These elementals are commonly known as earth personalities, gnomes, fairies, and elves, water personalities, undines, fire, salamanders, and air personalities, sylphs. This chant allows them to tune to you, and you to them. This is like having an exchange student or visitor from another culture. You begin to harmonize with each other. One day I met them in person while fussing at them about the sorry state of my garden. The cultivated garden around my house was full of weeds. I'd been on the road extensively and had come home to find weeds everywhere. I remember complaining, "This garden looks terrible. I thought you were going to help me keep it nice. I really wish I could hear you guys." Immediately I heard a cacophony of voices all talking at once. They were all talking to me in my garden, the gnomes, fairies, and elves. I said, all right, one at a time. I heard and saw in my mind's eye a gnome who was the leader. He appeared defiant, saying, "You never asked us to help you." I was dumbfounded. How could this be? I mentally retorted, "Yes, I did. Do not you remember the 150 tulips we planted? I carefully put dolomite in with each bulb and called upon you with every single bulb that went into the ground. He said, "No, you did not. You expected us to help you. You never asked." I stood there speechless. He was right. Now I was going to have to eat humble pie, which I did not want to do. I thought I had the right to get their help. I began to realize that a conscientious person with servants speaks lovingly and with kindness to the servants and does not demand anything. Who did I think I was anyway? I swallowed hard and apologized. Now I ask for their help. They do communicate with me now. This gift, along with the others mentioned above, is a result of the practice of the Hather chant. Here's a little hint for communication with the elemental kingdom. Focus your thought on the concept of a picture, like a single frame from a movie, of what you wish to accomplish. Then mentally project this picture to your unseen helpers. Hather chant hazard. We practice this chant in the group setting of my Advanced Flower of Life workshop. In one workshop, one of the participants, who is an attorney lobby IST, became paralyzed during the chant. He was able to think and breathe and sing, but was physically unable to move his body, which annoyed him very much. I now advise that you can expect your body to become very still, and if it feels as if you've lost control and cannot move, do not worry. The Hathors will work with your pranic tube and may have some very specific upgrades to install for you, which is why you need to be perfectly still. This has happened enough times that I know to expect it. You will be better than before after the Hather upgrades. Hather humor. In another advanced full workshop, during the chanting of this mantra, the Hathors appeared to one of the men in the class. He asked the Hathors to show him what the fifth dimension is like. One told him to bite the Hather's toe. He did. They all laughed hysterically. They said, "Do it again." He did, and they all laughed even more. When he shared his story, this man was laughing with such joy, like a little child, that we all laughed, too. Who could resist this infectious laughter? Just retelling this story makes me laugh and laugh. When the man in class told it, we laughed until we couldn't laugh anymore. If someone bites your toe, you yell for them to stop, but the Hathors did the unexpected and laughed. Don't let the laughter fool you into thinking this is silliness or frivolousness. True joy can come simply through laughter. Let this chant open your heart in ways you have never dreamed. This mantra is very powerful. Remember, you do not need to use the recording to do this chant, although you may find it is far easier to join with a choir that has mastered the pronunciation and count. It is also fun to sing harmony with it, to change the rhythm and pitch. It is easier to continue to chant with the choir and know it will keep going until you have reached precisely 256 repetitions. Hebrew chant. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai Sabaoth is the most powerful chant in the known world. Although its origins are Hebrew, it has been used by millions of people for centuries, so it carries a remarkable, purposeful imprint of transformation. Found in many places including J.J. Hurtick's The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch. Its purpose is to clear everything back to original intent. Unlike the Book of Knowledge, we have used the traditional phonetic spelling and pronunciation. My personal experience with this chant is nothing short of miraculous. When I worked with a linguist who had spent extensive time in the Middle East and knew both Hebrew and ancient Aramaic languages, she translated this chant to reflect a more current concept of forsaking all but God. This definition resonates with the effect it creates. Its energy can be accurately described to mean nothing that is not of God can exist when it is invoked. My early training included memorizing this as a form of protection of the purest or highest form. It will clear anything untoward, evil, spirits, or entities. It is especially useful while doing out-of-body work. It clears all the fields in the body and bridges us to all other dimensions. This mantra activates our holy grid bodies, which are more fully discussed in Chapter 13. Singing or saying this chant creates a bridge from third dimension to all other dimensions. Immersed in the chant, you will become one heart and completely connected to the love of God. It is extremely powerful. You may use this chant at any time or place. If you ever are fearful in real life, or see or experience dark energies on your spiritual journeys, asleep or in meditation, simply recite this chant. If the beings or energy are not of God's pure light, they may not, stay. This is the second chant of the recording titled Hebrew Chant, on my Mantras for Ascension CD or download. The Kadosh chant has been used by millions of people for centuries. It carries a remarkable, purposeful imprint of transformation. The traditional translation is, Holy, 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 Lord God of Hosts. Our new definition expands this understanding and helps you grasp its fullness. Forsake, forsake, forsake all that is unlike God. It provides you with additional information that enables you to better comprehend your true purpose and maximize its benefit in your world. A remarkable tool for emotional pain. The Hebrew chant is enormously effective for clearing emotional pain, anytime you are suffering from a broken heart for any reason. When you are connected to God, all resistance about lack, what you do not have, ceases, as you are in harmony with God and all of life. How does it work? This Hebrew chant clears a direct path back to God. Imagine a man with 2 machetes walking through the rainforest in front of you. Your complicated path is now perfectly clear. This is what it is like to sing this chant. I have found that most of our emotional pain comes from holding thoughts of the past related to circumstances that we cannot change. This leads to stuck emotions. The Hebrew chant is a marvelous tool to help you clear this pain. Have you ever been really upset and know that you need to emotionally shift, yet lack the will to act or think any different thoughts? It is easier to observe in others. Have you ever been so miserable that you are happy in your misery? This doesn't mean you do not know better, it is just that the pain is so deep, your wounds so great, that your ego needs the validation of time. End result: your feelings are stuck. Persons who recite this chant, or play it when they are in a deeply distraught emotional state, find the results miraculous. Sometimes you cannot really do anything to make something better. Playing this chant is one way to shift from your pain. You can repeat it or sing it to yourself. You don't need the recording to use this chant, but it does make it easier. When you hear it sung, it opens you to start feeling the energy of God. When you are feeling the energy of God, it is impossible to be miserable about anything. Experientially, it feels as if the cloud has lifted, and the presence of God is felt through your newfound peace of mind. Fast track your ascension process with these two chants and they will clear you completely on the inner and outer realms, throughout all your dimensions of awareness. You can see why I was instructed by my guides to name them mantras for ascension. Additional powerful chants. There are other chants you can learn to do when you are stuck in traffic or in the quiet of the night and cannot get to sleep. My personal favorite recordings in addition to the above are by Deva Premal. Wayne Dyer and others have released chanting CDs or downloads. Jonathan Goldman and Greg Braden have released a CD sounding all of the vowels sequentially as the expression of the name of God. Using this method you would chant the names of the 5 vowels in the English alphabet. Here they are spelled phonetically in the order they arise in the chant so you can sound them out. U, O, Ah, I, E. These toning recordings are quite profound and act as another tool for elevating consciousness. The advantage of using an external source of these sounds is that you get used to hearing it, which may make it easier for you to experiment on your own, but you do not need any recordings to do this work. Chanting is timeless. The world's religions provide us with other important chants. You can invoke something as simple as Hallelujah or more obscure Sanskrit and Hebrew chants. Some other traditions provide us with their most popular chants. Om Mani Padme Hum is a Buddhist mantra, which is also used by Grandmaster Lin Yun's Black Sect Feng Shui as one of the 3 secret reinforcements for the purpose of energizing a cure or an enhancement. This is part of the Feng Shui training I received as a graduate of one of his teacher's classes, and when you have a consultation with a graduate of his training they will ask you to do this to reinforce the positive Kai you are creating with the Feng Shui. You can chant or sing this mantra, and there are many recordings available worldwide. My favorite is by Philip Glass. Om Namah Shivaya. I bow to Shiva. A Hindu mantra used to call for peace, is often sung as Kirtan, a form of chanting the names of God. The words in Kirtan chants are the various Sanskrit names of Hindu deities: Krishna, Ram, Sita, Ram's wife, Gopala, baby Krishna, and so on. There are also occasional honorifics, such as Shri, Sir, and expressions of praise or victory, such as Jai or Jaya. The format of Kirtan is call and response, a musical style that dates back centuries and is a basic element of musical form in many traditions. For this style of singing, a leader, or first group in other traditions, sings a line that is then echoed by another group. Krishna Das is a well-known example of Kirtan singers in this style. The purpose of repeating these names in ever-shuffling combinations is a simple one: to merge with the divine. My favorite recording, by Robert Gass, has sold more than 250,000 copies. When the World Trade Center was attacked in 2001, many individuals asked me what they could do. I told them to play this chant continuously and join in this chant whenever a moment became available. It is an easy thing that we can do, and I believe it can bring peace. Ritual vocalizing has been practiced for centuries and remains one of the most universal human impulses. We have no recordings of the earliest humans, but when we encounter indigenous tribes who've had little contact with modern civilization, they all have sacred chants tracing their oral history back to their earliest origins. And, if you look into creation myths from different cultures, in almost every case, the world is said to come into being through sound, through chant. It is in Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, and Native American religions. That is evidence of an indigenous nature. The other evidence you can look at is young children. Almost all young children make up repetitive songs. They lose themselves in the rapture of singing. Composer and pianist Philip Glass has led the charge in bringing lesser-known chants to the West. His Freedom Chants from the Roof of the World, with the Kyoto monks, Kotaro, and Mickey Hart, was recorded at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York during the first Chinese crackdown on Tibet. The 21 monks are from the 500-year-old Kyoto Tantric order, chanting for freedom and world peace. Their throat singing is accompanied by intermittent percussion and horns in a series of meditations to Buddhist deities. It's a beautiful and uplifting recording that is a paean to harmony and tolerance. In an article on Kirtan, frequent contributor to Yoga Journal Phil Catalfo writes, "Although we can't prove it, chant, or sacred singing, was probably one of the first expressions of human spirituality. It seems very clear," says singer-songwriter Jennifer Barazan, "that humans have been sounding and chanting as far back as the Paleolithic Age and beyond." Barazan's album Returning, which blends original and traditional chants from cultures around the globe into a seamless, hour-long opus, was recorded in the subterranean oracle chamber of the Hypogeum at Hal Saflieni, a temple on the island of Malta. This chamber, renowned for its special resonance, was created for devotional rituals 6,000 years ago. It is likely, she adds, that for thousands of years there were unbroken practices of sound and song, possibly often relating to various ritual practices such as birthing, planting, harvesting, death, and shamanistic practices of healing and visioning. Chanting in the King's Chamber. Another location well known for its acoustical properties is the King's Chamber inside the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Sounds from the Great Pyramid is a 2-CD set that recreates the experience of toning inside the King's Chamber. Recorded by a group of spiritual seekers who had traveled with me on one of my sacred journeys to Egypt, the group is chanting Om inside the King's Chamber. Much has been written about this room and many healing experiences have been reported. My favorite experience regarding the King's Chamber involves Hatem, a group manager for spiritual tour operator Quest Travel. Now operated by Marwan Nazmi, Quest has done much to advance opportunities for spiritual teachers. We all owe them a debt of gratitude. Muhammad Nazmi, his late father, was one of the most well-respected ground operators throughout Egypt. He passed away in 2018 and his son Marwan now runs the company. Figure 3.1. Maureen with Quest founder Muhammad Nazmi. We had been in the King's Chamber for nearly 2 hours. It can be pretty intense, and we are usually soaked with sweat from top to bottom in that hot space. Nobody ever complains. We usually are in such an altered state by the time we come back from our time there that we're oblivious. I was the last one to come down the plank from the King's Chamber as we exited. I like to be last to make sure everyone in our group gets out. Hatem was waiting for me. Standing full face in front of me, Hatem gave me a full body hug. This was unusual, for Egyptian men don't necessarily touch women, and tour operators do not necessarily hug their clients in this way. I was surprised, but I let it go. Our tour continued to sacred sites throughout Egypt for the next 2 weeks. We all left Egypt and I flew to Paris for a week of teaching. My return to the States passed through Cairo, so late one evening Hatem picked me up with his driver from my Paris flight and escorted me to my airport hotel for my brief overnight before my flight to New York the following day. He turned to me from the passenger side of the front seat and said, "Maureen, I have something I need to tell you. Do you remember the hug I gave you after you were in the King's Chamber?" Yes, I smiled, remembering how incredible that group had been. Leaning over the front seat toward me he continued, "I had had a terrible back problem for the last 6 months. Every healer, doctor, masseuse, or energy worker I met, I asked to work on me. It would help briefly but nothing lasted. I knew that if I was the first person to hug you after your return from the King's Chamber, I would be healed. It has been 3 weeks. I am cured. Thank you." Hatem is not the only person to credit the King's Chamber with a near miraculous healing. John Reed, a sound scientist and cymatics researcher, reports that his back was in such bad shape that he had to pay someone to carry his sound equipment into the King's Chamber. However, after lying in the sarcophagus there, he found his back was completely healed and without pain, and he carried his heavy equipment out of the Great Pyramid effortlessly. Using the sounds from the Great Pyramid CDs will assist you in recreating the original group's experience. Numerous individuals have used these recordings for various applications from meditation and journey work to healing physical ailments. I was guided to use toning in the King's Chamber, along with the power of Phi found in the very structure of the Great Pyramid. Using the knowledge of Phi as related to sacred geometry in the Great Pyramid, these powerful CDs are focused on the interdimensional portal I believe to exist in the King's Chamber. You may discover that the toning and connection with the King's Chamber and Phi will take you on a journey greater than you could have imagined. A user of this CD wrote, "As I listened I was immediately transported to the King's Chamber. I felt myself being shot out of the top of the point of the pyramid as if being shot out of a cannon. I was being taken up and up through a space of nothingness. As this happened I saw several events in my life from a new perspective. This is awesome. Thanks for giving us such a powerful tool." Finally, while beta testing this CD, I received a call from Ron Holt, former president and director of Flower of Life Research, now closed. I needed to put the phone down for a moment to get something, and the soundtrack for the sounds from the Great Pyramid was playing in the next room. When I came back, Ron asked, "What are you playing?" I could feel something really powerful in that sound. "What is it?" When I told him it was the toning in the King's Chamber, he said, "Wow, I could really feel the vibration coming right through the phone." This was from a small boombox with speakers in the next room. How does chanting affect your ascension work? Any form of ritual vocalizing or toning and chanting will bypass the brain and go for resonance. This tells us it doesn't require thinking or emotional processing to heal an emotional wound. Emotional healing is essential for ascension work, because hanging on to your emotional wounds will keep you tied to past pain and trapped in third-dimensional experience. Resonance will tune the entire body, and especially the heart, to the frequency of God. Figure 3.2. This is the field your heart creates around the body during toning or activating the Merkaba. Have you seen the many drawings of the torus around the heart? See Figure 3.2. Toning the names of God in any form, such as kirtan or vowel sounds, brings you in your awareness closer to the divine and aligns you with higher vibrations. Sacred sounds and toning have been used for centuries by the world's religions with great effect. If you are having any trouble breaking the barrier to your heart, consider a toning regimen as a valuable tool to help you bypass the mind. Opening your heart is essential for the Merkaba meditation. The more your heart is open, the more effective the Merkaba becomes. These two elements, the heart opening and the Merkaba meditation, will bring you into resonance with the universe and your fifth dimensional self. The dimensions are covered in Chapter 12. This allows you to tune with the world around you in such a powerful way that you will be able to know what you need to know, when you need to know it. 4. Initiating contact with your higher self. What you will learn in this chapter. What the higher self is and is not. The first steps to accessing your higher self. How to recognize and use your lower self. Why you must ask when you wish to receive. How to establish signals and develop confidence in your higher self connection. What is the higher self? The higher self is a version of you that is fully connected to God. It is that part of you that is fully aware of yourself as you and as God. Some call the higher self the mediator, but even that implies separateness, which is not real. Your first goal is to communicate with your higher self. The next goal is to move your higher self presence into your physical body. Then you will be a walking ascended being. Imagine for a moment that your higher self is like a circuit board that has unlimited potential. In third dimensional expression, you have a very limited circuit board. If you put too much voltage through the circuit, you can burn it out. You can try to go directly to God, but because of your circuit board's limitation, your connection to God is restricted by who you are in the physical body. 10. Your goal is to use your heart to expand your capacity. As you expand your heart through the many practices offered in this book, you will discover that your capacity to know and express your love of God increases dramatically. Eventually, with an expanded heart, you can be a direct channel from Source. Imagine your cell phone connection in a remote area. Every time you are on your phone, your connection is unstable. Yet, when you have Wi-Fi access, that direct access is easy and fast. You could make an important call from the remote area, but when you know where to get Wi-Fi direct access, i.e., your higher self, you would choose that. The purpose of this section is to help you identify your higher self, work with developing your communication, and learn to get direct access to God through your higher self. What is the higher self connection? The higher self connection is something you build with a specific practice that, if done with diligence, will not fail you in your time of need. Ultimately, this is the first step you are seeking. As far as I am concerned, after the opening of the heart in Chapter 2, this is the most important part of the book. This is more important than programming your Merkaba. Remember, whether you choose to learn the Merkaba or not, your higher self connection is the most important inner GPS you could ever achieve. It completely eliminates the need or usage of any other form of divination. The higher self connection is something you build with a specific practice that will not fail you in your time of need. This is more important than programming your Merkaba. If you attempt to program your Merkaba without the higher self connection, you will fail miserably and can cause considerable damage to yourself and others. Programming the Merkaba without higher self endorsement for each and every program is a form of black magic. After you have established direct communication with your higher self, you will be able to integrate more of your higher self into your physical form. This is the goal of ascension. When you do this, you are claiming your roots. You are claiming your heritage as a divine being. What's stopping me? When you were born, you deliberately placed a barrier between you and your physical body and who you really are, your God self, in order to move your consciousness into physical matter. Once there, it is very likely that you forgot who you really are. The goal then is to reconnect you to yourself and become an enlightened being. You are not likely to do this instantly. You are moving through it slowly. You will maintain your awareness in the physical form while bringing in more of your divine self. If you brought in all of your divinity at once, you would not be able to maintain your presence in your body. You would pop out of the physical dimension. As you become more adapted and aware, allowing for integration of more and more of your higher self, then becoming the higher self is easily accomplished while maintaining your presence in the physical. Once you have developed your higher self connection to this new level, your higher self will communicate to you with unsolicited information. This is just like developing a friendship with the shopkeepers at a local shop you frequent. They will anticipate your tastes and interests and offer you things you might like. In a similar fashion, your higher self will begin to offer you information that you did not even know you needed. This is just wonderful. You may remember switching from a regular television to HD TV. You are still receiving the same TV show you were before, only now it's in high definition. The input hasn't changed, but your reception has greatly improved. Your ability to perceive the information has changed. You are a special and powerful being. You know who you are, yet at the same time may be afraid to admit it. If you are reading this book, you know that. This doesn't mean you are better than anyone else. You are not better. You are equal. Your self-awareness may be larger in any given moment than another's, but this does not mean you are more evolved or better. What it does mean is that you are self-aware to a different degree. Your role is unique. The color blue vibrates faster than the color red. Does that faster vibration make blue better than red? Hardly. You could be part of the way showers who have arrived for the purpose of going ahead and helping others toward their ascension. If this is true, you will be drawn to serve as part of the enlightenment crew. If you are part of this advanced crew, you may already be an ascended being and are remembering. Keep up the good work and you will be helping many others besides yourself. Extras hold the polarity reality. Others who are unlike you may very well be placeholders for the polarity reality, third dimension, so that you can totally see what you are choosing to see. Without them you would not be able to see what you see. It may also be that when you no longer need to push toward your evolution and become enlightened, you will no longer need others to hold that polarity for you. 11. What if all those others you are observing are extras, as they say on a movie set, just holding space for you and they're just for your benefit? 12. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark 13 were ordinary men, but they were explorers in way showers. You are one, too. Please believe me when I tell you that those who are reading this page at this point are at the edge of the cosmos of creation. You are at the end of the reality of creation, which means that you may feel as if you are out there all alone or with relatively few others. Remember though, Lewis and Clark had the full support of the United States government behind them. You have the full support of the Great White Brotherhood behind you. Some would say that an important person must lead or go first to deal with all the fears and surprises, which may be difficult. I like to say it is a privilege and honor. Both are correct. Whatever the case, you are up to the challenge. They only send the strong to do this sort of job. If you are reading this, chances are you are one of the strong, volunteer way showers. You did not come in alone. You have plenty of unseen helpers. You have plenty of support from the Creator. All you need to do is ask for the help you need. Do it daily, since this is a free will zone and you get a clean slate every day. Ask for what you need. A military officer sent to the field does not think twice about requisitioning supplies he may need to get the job done. If you need help and don't ask for it, you are missing the element of humility that allows you to ask for and receive help. Please ask for the help you need. The price is right, and believe me when I tell you, the beings of light are here to support you and need you to ask in order for them to fulfill their mission. Remember, we are in a free will zone. What is required of you is the ability to be fully present in the reality. That is a form of training. Anyone who is forging new paths, the Wright brothers, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and so on, relies on his wits. He also receives plenty of support in terms of getting all the latest information and tools that enable him to perform groundbreaking feats. He gets all the glory and credit, even though there is a huge body of personnel, research, and science behind him that makes his mission possible. He still must apply his personal ingenuity to complete the job. You must be willing to take the first step, to step up to the plate, as they say in baseball. You must be willing to risk failure to achieve your evolution. Use this metaphor to know that you can ask for, and are entitled to, all the support required. If you are not getting what you think you need, ask again with clear conviction that you submitted the purchase order and that the system, the universe, absolutely must fulfill this order. One thing is certain. Just because your friends and family might not provide a whole lot of positive reinforcement, that doesn't mean all of heaven doesn't care. All of heaven is asking you to break through the patterns of your past, your family, your generation, our society, our culture, and so on. Not having support from your physical family forces you to gain conviction about what you believe and what you want. This actually helps you define boundaries and claim your power. Support is likely to be there from the heavenly hosts because you are at the front of the masses. Ask, how will you know you are on target? Your higher self will know. You will use your higher self connection to validate that what you are being given is on target. You can ask your higher self to validate anything you want. The saints and masters have achieved a full connection, and so can you. The way to a complete awareness of God, enlightenment, is through your higher self, and there are many ways to get connected to your higher self. Doing the Merkaba, and using the tools found in this book, is one of them. Connecting with the higher self is a key element to learning the Merkaba. We all have a higher self we can access and use, although many of us are not aware of it. How do you connect with the higher self? How is that different from just tuning in, or asking for guidance? Before we begin that, allow me to introduce the lower self. The lower self is like the child to your adult ego self and is made up of elements. The lower self. Yes, there is a lower self. When I first learned about a Hawaiian spiritual practice for connecting to the lower self from Drunvalo, I ignored it. After all, I already had a strong connection with my higher self. I really did not need to be concerned about a lower self I didn't believe existed. Drunvalo had learned about it from a student in his class who radiated so much light that Drunvalo asked the man what he did. He was a Hawaiian kahuna who taught about both the lower and higher self. He said that ancient Hawaiians believed the lower self is like a child, and that you must become like an innocent child to connect through the lower self with the higher self. I believe this same concept is why Drunvalo suggests you become like a child to connect with the higher self. I didn't know anything about the lower self at that time either. Through trial and error I learned why it is so important to understand this concept. In my own experience I became aware that my lower self was not only the little girl in me, but much, much more. The lower self is dedicated to keeping you safe, teaching you about the ways of the world, and helping you to understand life. In a way it is the simplest part of you. It is a compilation of mostly your ego and your desire body, emotional body, mental body, and physical body. It includes all the elements of you that operate your four lower body systems, physical, emotional, mental, etheric, that are centered on a physical incarnation. Up until now the lower self has done a good job. After all, it has gotten you this far. The lower self is your friend. The lower self will give you accurate information for the immediate circumstances, especially if it has to do with your physical safety or your emotional body. Lower self-feedback can be influenced by individuals who are around you in the environment, however, so the information is accurate but only to a point. The lower self also keeps track of past hurts and wounds to help you avoid similar situations. The lower self can also jump in and answer your questions without you realizing it is the lower self. To help illustrate this, I will be sharing with you stories about how the lower self can interact with you and you mistakenly could think it was your higher self. But first let us learn more about the lower self. The practice of kinesiology, *14 or muscle testing to read the body, is lower self information. You can get lower self data from a pendulum as well. I don't recommend the use of a pendulum because you can become dependent on it and because it can be influenced by your environment or the material that it is made from. Ideally, you will develop a connection with your higher self that makes the use of the pendulum obsolete. I am not saying using a pendulum is wrong. Remember, your goal is self-mastery and becoming your most evolved expression of you. You must learn to access your most authentic source, and in all cases this source is your higher self, which is your direct connection to God. Lower self-information is accurate to a point, but its operating system is based on experiences gained from living in a physical body. The lower self is pulling its information from the limited database of your four lower bodies: physical, emotional, mental, and etheric. It may also be pulling information and collecting data from individuals around you and from the environment. Because the lower self keeps track of past hurts and wounds, it can influence you to stay away from situations. Your lower self might choose to avoid similar painful situations that may be important to you now. You could be influenced inappropriately by your lower self if it is reflecting the data from your physical location or from nearby persons. This is why it may be useful to use kinesiology or a pendulum to determine what vitamins you should take, what therapies you might need, or sensitivities to food. The practice of applied kinesiology 15 or manual muscle testing to read the body is lower self-information. You can get lower self-data from a pendulum as well. Your higher self is your direct connection to God. Because the lower self keeps track of past hurts and wounds, it can influence you to stay away from situations. Your lower self might choose to avoid similar painful situations that may be important to you now. The children's story Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie gives us a very compelling look at the lower self. It shows Peter Pan giving an accurate display of the lower self making all the decisions and avoiding situations that may be useful to an adult. The lower self has your best interests at heart, but it acts like a child in comparison to your higher self. This means that it has a limited vision of what you wish for yourself in this reality. It also is not as readily able to cross-reference all of your needs into one composite understanding. How do you distinguish your higher self from lower self? Whenever you ask your higher self a question, always begin with higher self. Do not assume that if you pose a question in your mind the voice answering is your higher self. Unless you have specifically addressed your higher self by name, it can be anything. The lower self can jump in and answer your questions without you realizing it is the lower self. There was a woman who asked her higher self if she should go on a date with a man she found attractive. She received an affirmative answer. They went out, nothing bad happened, and nothing good happened. The woman, who also valued her time, came home frustrated and asked her higher self, what was that all about? Her higher self responded, you never asked your higher self when you asked the question. She was astonished. Her higher self continued, your lower self jumped in and answered for your higher self. The woman was quite shocked. It had never occurred to her when she asked the question that her lower self could answer for her higher self. It was at that point she realized she had not specified who should answer the question and presumed it was her higher self. There is also the possibility you may have entities that will answer your questions. They may give you accurate but biased information. Be careful. Remember, your higher self will answer when called. The woman who went on the fruitless date with a man who turned out to be of no interest to her was getting accurate information from her lower self. Why? Because her lower self was expressing for the little girl who wanted to be special, the woman in her who wanted to be desirable, and the part of her that wanted companionship. Had she also known there would be no friendship and it would not go anywhere, she would have declined the invitation. Her higher self would have known other factors that were more important to her and given her a different answer. When this decision was put into the context of her busy lifestyle, it was very clear to her that it was a waste of her time. Only her higher self would be able to arrive at that conclusion by weighing all of her needs and providing her with a response that would be the perfect solution for her. The lower self has your personal information close at hand. The higher self has access to all the information from the four lower bodies, your divine self, and other persons involved, and is able to integrate them all to bring balanced responses. You may not know why your higher self gives you a certain answer, and it may seem counterintuitive. Your higher self has access to everything beyond your physical senses as well, along with everything beyond your mental awareness in the recesses of your mind. When you go on a driving road trip and use your GPS or Maps app, it tells you all the roadblocks and delays. Using the higher self is like using your GPS. This can be compared to the lower self that may be reading a map or looking at a compass, but might not have the latest updates. The higher self, along with your activated Merkaba, responds to your current request, taking in all factors, known or unknown to you. Using your higher self along with your activated Merkaba ensures you are fully connected to the reality throughout all time, all dimensions, and all space. Your higher self connection is valid whether you are practicing the Merkaba meditation or not. Your Merkaba helps you maintain your fifth-dimensional energy flawlessly. In spite of this, if you could only do one thing, the higher self connection will steer you toward love and the highest and best choice for you in the moment. The higher self is the central guide. The activated Merkaba makes living as a 5D easier in a 3D world. What is the difference between your higher self and your lower self? Your higher self is proactive, your lower self is reactive. Your higher self knows and understands your circumstances from a universal perspective and integrates all of your needs, wants, and desires as well as the activity of the physical world around you. Your lower self is operating from a limited perspective and is not fully integrated, so it cannot weigh conflicting desires the way the higher self does. Given the choice, most decisions would benefit from full awareness of the reality. What about intuition? Information received intuitively can be coming from any of the above places. It may or may not include all pertinent data. Your intuitive information could also be coming from external entities or energies that are not authentically you. Other people's thoughts can enter your head, especially if they are thinking about you and you were thinking about them. Many couples experience this communication phenomenon as normal. Information coming from your lower self may feel like it is coming from intuition, but it could come from your desires, from external entities, or from the child in you who wants something you have long forgotten. Your information might come from your angels or guides. Angels and guides. What is wrong with getting information from the angels or guides? Nothing is wrong with that, except it is not authentically you, and your purpose and goal here is to learn and gain access to your divine self. Our angels and guides stand ready to help us at any time, and are probably with you now. The purpose of the angelic presence on Earth is to help build a personal relationship between Creator and the human race. They want you to gain this connection and will fully support your getting it. In fact, my angels have given me a metaphor to explain this. Suppose you are driving a fun sports car on a mountain road. Initially, you might be going pretty fast as you enjoy the open air, the sunshine, and the beautiful countryside. Then your lower self kicks in, that part of you that keeps you safe most of the time, and decides maybe you should slow down and take it easy. After all, it is a pretty curvy road. Or maybe it is one of your guides or an angel telling you to slow down. Another car approaches from the opposite direction and you manage to stay out of its way, even though the driver has crossed over the center line into your lane, right in front of you. You end up swerving to your side of the road, but still safe. You manage to pull yourself together and think, wow, that was a close call. Good thing I slowed down and my reactions were so quick. Lower self is reactive. Your higher self is proactive. Your higher self would experience this whole scenario and take a proactive approach. Your higher self will be aware of the oncoming car long before you are and send you a message such as, why don't you take a break? You've been driving for a while and need to rest. There's a scenic overlook coming up ahead. Pull over and enjoy the view. When the car from the other direction comes down that road toward you, you are out of harm's way. You might not even know that a reckless driver is coming down the hill. You never notice because your higher self directed you to get off the road. You are able to see how your higher self influenced your actions proactively and allowed the circumstances to occur around you, while keeping you from being directly involved. Your higher self is proactive, your lower self is reactive. There is no number. Many years ago when I first started working with this information, I realized there was only yes. Although you can teach your higher self no, technically there is no no. This is why I refer to choice as God or not God. So if you get a good clear signal for yes and nothing for no or neutral, you have enough information to operate in the reality. Go with that. Advance awareness. One of my longtime students shared what happened to her. Ginny was very proud of having earned her black belt in karate, a feat she accomplished after she turned 50. Those who have arrived at this karate milestone know that once you've earned your black belt is when the serious work begins. Every Monday morning she dutifully drove 1 hour on an interstate to get to her dojo in the next city. One particular Monday morning she decided she wanted to meet with her teacher. She calculated that if she started out 1.5 hours early, it would give her plenty of time to meet with him. She left her home at 7:30 a.m. for her 9 a.m. class. Along the way she received a message from her higher self. On this highway there are 3 exits going into the destination city. Her higher self instructed her to take the first exit. The first exit is convenient and entails the fewest miles, but it takes much more time due to local traffic and rush hour. The second exit, although longer by miles, is the most direct, routing around city traffic. It generally takes the least amount of time. The third exit is way out of her way. While driving, she was told 3 times to get off at the first exit. She rationalized each time that it would consume some of her precious extra time for her desired meeting with her instructor. She drove right past the first highway exit. The second highway exit was closed because there were men working in it. Taking the only remaining exit, she now was required to drive quite a distance out of her way. The instructor did speak to her the moment she arrived. He commanded 50 push-ups since she arrived late to class. Ginny was able to recognize in hindsight that her higher self had been trying to provide her with what she really wanted. She dismissed it because she was accustomed to feeling that her best information would come from using her logic. 3 times, while driving, she was told to get off at the first exit. She rationalized each time that it would take too long and chose to follow her ego. Have you ever done that? Hindsight leads us to a different conclusion. and we understand that 15 minutes early is better than 15 minutes late. There is a logical reason for using your higher self information, and we will get to that shortly. I have been teaching this aspect of the higher self connection since I began offering the Merkaba workshop in 1995. On September 11, 2001, I had my own hindsight about how significant this higher self connection really is. Higher self and 9/11. I had been guided to hold my series of workshops in New York City in September 2001. In New York, I did not have a host and selected dates based on my higher self direction. I had been going to the city regularly and had received prompting from my higher self to be in New York in September and the exact dates to be there. Once the workshop dates had been set, I decided I would add an extra day to shop and visit friends while I was there. Back then, I did not ask my higher self about a vacation day. This particular trip had me flying home on September 11th. However, when I attempted to purchase my airline ticket, I felt my higher self directing me to come home immediately after the workshop on September 10th. People have asked me, what was it like? For me, I had this sinking feeling. Have you ever played the game of Monopoly? Think about how you feel when you pull the card that says, go to jail, go directly to jail. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. It was that kind of feeling, and very strong. I asked, what am I to do then? I was told, go directly home, no playtime this trip. At the time, a friend asked me, why aren't you staying as you planned? And I told him, I really do not know. I just know I need to be home. Maybe one of my sons will need me for something. When one becomes accustomed to the voice of the higher self, it is easy to listen and to follow the direction given. The higher self does not always show up for me as a voice, sometimes it is a feeling. In this instance, I had no idea how significant that would be. I would not have been on the downed flights of September 11th if I had stayed in New York that extra day, but I would not have gotten home. There were no flights anywhere in the country for a whole week while the government sorted out the next course of action to follow this terrible act. I was very grateful not to be caught in the chaos of being grounded at an airport far from home while a teenage son was at home for a week without mom. A student in that class had a job interview that Tuesday morning where she was scheduled to walk through the World Trade Center just about the time of chaos. That morning she was so uncomfortable with the prospect that she called her interviewer asking if she could interview by phone. She understood in hindsight that her feeling of discomfort may have saved her life. Invocations. In my invocation at the altar at each workshop, I ask for a direct connection with my higher self and the higher self of each person in my class. I specifically ask that their higher self be able to communicate directly with mine so that I might serve each person perfectly. I then ask for the same connection with each of us, that we might all serve each other perfectly. A similar invocation is also part of my daily practice. You are encouraged to do the same. My favorite is an exceptionally helpful tool to receive higher self assistance with interpersonal interactions when trying to communicate with someone who may not be hearing what you have to say in third-dimensional reality. I ask for my higher self to work with the higher self of the other person, for the purpose of fill in the blank, and that this communication be for the highest good of all, creating a win-win circumstance for everyone. We all have interacted with bosses, spouses, relatives, or customers who, for whatever reason, are unable to hear what we have to say. I have often advised people who may be facing a difficult meeting or negotiation to ask for the higher self connection between all persons so that everyone's needs can be heard, met, and addressed. Following is a true story of a woman who made such an invocation, and how it may have saved her client's life. Higher self to higher self in the emergency room. One of my students, an alternative healer named Juanita, was giving ongoing monthly treatments to a client named Susan, a medical doctor. Prior to their work together, Dr. Susan had landed in the emergency room with a panic attack. The drugs used to treat her turned out to be totally wrong for her, causing her to leave her body and have a near-death experience. 4 years later, Dr. Susan had another emergency room visit, with what turned out to be another panic attack. Although she is a medical doctor, some major emotional things had just occurred in her life to trigger this panic. Although the attack was not at all related to the healing work they had been doing together, Juanita knew Susan needed to go to the emergency room and insisted she go. Because of their ongoing relationship, Susan asked Juanita to work on her remotely while she was in the emergency room. Because Juanita had trained with me and understood the use of the higher self connection, she called in the higher self of the attending physician and asked for both Susan and the physician to be connected to their higher selves, and to each other's higher selves. The instruction was that whoever was the emergency room doctor would get his instruction on the appropriate medicine from Susan's higher self. Later, Juanita spoke to Susan about this. The healer's prayer occurred at the same time that the attending physician announced with considerable passion that he was going to go with his gut and use a specific medication. He selected a less commonly prescribed medication, which turned out to be the exact one able to heal the anxiety attack and help Susan through her crisis without a drug reaction. Juanita explained to Susan that her higher self had directed her to create a link between the two doctors, the emergency room doctor and the patient doctor, at the higher self level. The emergency room doctor accepted his strong feelings and let them guide him to an alternate medication. He was in reality getting accurate information from the higher self of the patient, Susan, making sure the correct medication would be used this time. Higher self and family matters. In another example, a young mom wanted to attend a seminar. She and her former husband were alternating weekends with their sons, and the weekend of the workshop was clear for her. But then one of her sons was selected as one of 100 finalists for a full scholarship. All the candidates and their families were invited for a weekend at the college, where the students would go through a series of interviews and tests. This was, of course, the same weekend as the seminar. The mom knew it would not be fair to haul all their children for the 8-hour drive to the college. Caught in a dilemma of what to do, she consulted her higher self. The first thing her higher self told her was, "This is not your decision. This is your son's decision. Tell him there are 3 choices and all decisions are equal. He can drive to the college with either parent or fly by himself." When given the choice, her son didn't hesitate. "In that case, I will go by myself and fly." This mom would never have considered the third alternative, but because it came from her higher self, she was confident it was a good decision for all involved. This enabled her to take care of her son and also attend her seminar. What is a signal from the higher self? How do I know I'm getting a real signal? A signal or symbol from the higher self can take any form. For those of you who are kinesthetic, you may experience a feeling, others have a sense or knowing. If you already have this sense or feeling, you will understand it more confidently with practice. Others get colors, shapes, or other visual experiences. Some will hear something, still others will notice a scent. I have included examples in the table here from a few of my students to show you what some other people have experienced. What if I don't get yes and no symbols or signals? If you have been doing Merkaba meditation for a while, ask your higher self for symbols or signals, and you come up with nothing, it is time for you to select symbols you can understand and teach them to your higher self. You will need to pick something to communicate this knowledge of what you want for the signals or symbols signifying yes, no, and neutral. How do I teach the higher self my signals? What if I do not get a clear signal in meditation? Now what do I do? When my oldest son was a 2-year-old, he taught us the word for cheese, it was ga. He could not say cheese, so every time he saw cheese, a favorite of his at the time, he named it for us. We learned that if he wanted cheese he would say ga. If your higher self doesn't give you clear signals, then you will assign values that you can recognize in this same way. To set the matrix for these signals, select something you can easily replicate in your mind's eye. Make it something simple that you will accept. For example, if you see colors easily, green could stand for yes, red for no, or thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no. If you find it easier to experience energy in your body or a feeling, you might decide that a simple energy, whoosh, on the right side could stand for yes, on the left for no, and in the middle for neutral. Many people experience geometric shapes as one of their signals. Whatever it is, choose something that will work for you. But pick something and let it stand. Do not question it. If you decide that a red car should be your signal for yes, and you close your eyes and cannot imagine a red car, that is not a good signal for you. You must select something you can replicate in your mind's eye, and then your higher self can communicate it to you to experience it. Then practice with something you already know the answer to so that you can get the feel of it. An example is, do I have a son? You already know the answer. Let the correct symbol or signal present itself. Continue practicing with mundane questions such as, higher self, is it in my highest and best good to wear this shirt today? If the answer is no, move to the next shirt and repeat the question. You can ask, higher self, is this route my highest and best good? Keep asking the same way. Looking at a menu, ask, higher self, is it in my highest and best good to get the soup? If the response is neutral, ask, higher self, is it in my highest and best good to get the salad? If the response is neutral, ask, both. The response may be yes. Remember to phrase them as yes or no questions, always addressing the higher self by name. Notice the tendency to ask, should I? Has been replaced with, higher self, is it in my highest and best good? What about neutral? There are 5 possible reasons for a neutral response. They will be discussed in the next chapter. Please note that neutral is not maybe. Many people get this confused. Neutral means neither yes nor no. You might want to ask more questions after the neutral response to get clarity. Once you understand the 5 possible reasons for the neutral response, it will make more sense. Examples of symbols or signals. Brian's yes symbol is a smiley face. When he went walking on the beach right after the meditation where that information came in, he found a shell with a smiley face worn into it by Mother Nature. The synchronicity of finding that shell was the higher self providing clarity and reinforcing his signal. Kelly first experienced her higher self through the Michelangelo painting of the hand of God reaching for the hand of man as her symbol of the higher self. Her yes signal was a thumb pointing up and thumbs down for no. Dennis's higher self has a sense of humor. His signals are a Mickey Mouse white gloved hand with the thumb up or down. A man in the class was the drag-along partner of a woman who was very into this work. He decided to attend on a whim. He had never really done any meditation before and he asked me, in a whispered voice, can your higher self have a sense of humor? When the higher self connection was made, his higher self showed him a red beating heart for yes and green M&Ms for no. That same man was given a vision of his higher self the following day. He whispered in my ear, can my higher self be a woman? Coincidentally, that same man shares the same first name with another male student from a few years back. Both men's higher selves appear as a woman. In one class there was a lot of crystal energy expressed in the location, and the store hosting me had hundreds of crystals. Many participants in this class experienced their signals in the form of crystals. In another class, a man, Tom, was a former military guy. His signals reflected him as a paratrooper getting ready to jump from a plane. His neutral signal was at the open door of the plane, and he never jumps. His no signal is the jump and his parachute does not open. Yes is him jumping and the chute opens. Another man in that same class sees his higher self represented by lightning. Jagged means yes and has a direct feeling. Spiral lightning is no with a dancing type feeling, and neutral shows up as a flat line of lightning. The signal for neutral frequently tends to come up as a flat line or some variation thereof, such as a horizon, the sea, or a minus sign. The table here contains some of the information from students coming through the meditation where I introduce the higher self and ask for the higher self signals. Help, I'm not getting anything. If you do not get a symbol or signal, don't despair. You are not alone, and I will be providing tools to help you communicate with your higher self. If you do not get a signal, it just means you are not visual or auditory. It may mean that you are so mental or cerebral that you have not allowed those signals to appear for you. Allow yourself to see or feel any kind of response, and with practice, you will find the higher self connection. In the next chapter, you will receive instructions and techniques to help you develop and strengthen your higher self connection. Practice is critical. When do I ask my higher self these questions? Initially, you will ask your higher self questions while you are in meditation. If you are doing the Merkaba, it is between breaths 14 and 15. Many of us take a little pause there, and it is a perfect time to connect with your higher self. This is because you are anchored into your heart starting from breath 14. I always invite my higher self to join me in my heart. You will also find this instruction in my version of the Merkaba meditation in the CD Audio Merkaba 2. Remember that the ideal meeting ground for you and your higher self is in your heart, because it is the one place you both have in common. It is much preferable to check in with your higher self while in your meditation. Just as on a cell phone, it is far easier to receive clear communication if you are in a place with good reception. If your cell phone keeps cutting out on you, you are likely to limit your conversation until you have clear reception. Remember that the best reception between you and your higher self is while you are in your heart. You may even wish to go back to chapter 2 to review some of the heart opening exercises. How do I actually do this? Upon completing breath 14, while you are still in meditation doing the Merkaba, you simply think or ask the following, *16. Higher self, I am choosing to be in my heart. Please join me in my heart. Higher self, I am making a commitment to build a new level of communication between me and my higher self. Because of this, I am asking my higher self for a signal or symbol for yes. I am asking my higher self for a signal or symbol for no. I am asking my higher self for a signal or symbol for neutral. Wait for the signal or symbol to appear. I thank you, higher self, for working with me. Even if you think you already have a good connection with your higher self, you can always improve it. No matter what level you are at with your communication, there is always room for improvement. If you disagree, then you do not need this book. A woman observed in a class that everyone around her was getting guidance from higher self, yet she was not. Someone said, "Have you asked?" Asking your higher self to work with you more closely will bring the higher self in more closely. You are also making a clear commitment to start to interact with your higher self. It is an important act of will. Make sure you ask. Fuzzy information. Occasionally, as your higher self connection becomes richer, you will discover something will not feel quite right. Perhaps the information will be muddy or seem strange compared to your usual feelings when checking in with your higher self. Pursuing this suspicion will help you recognize to reframe your question or ask, what is going on? Lack of clarity is significant and requires further investigation. Ask, is this my higher self? Only your higher self may respond with a yes. Getting to know your higher self communication leads to all kinds of information you did not expect. Find a way to unhook from your need to know, or any other need. Be open and consciously work at non-judgmental review and reaction to your higher self information. Choose to step away from the habit of interpreting everything from a polarity vantage point. Instead of saying, I am not getting anything, especially if you usually do, consider that vagueness has its own message. What is going on? You will learn more about the higher dimensions in chapter 12. Ultimately, I concluded that there is only one question to ask your higher self. That question is non-pejorative, non-judgmental, and very open-ended. It is, higher self, what is going on? Now, the opening of your heart is the key to understanding the information you are getting. Think of your heart opening as if it were a translator. The more open and receptive to giving and receiving unconditional love, the more you will be able to comprehend the incoming data. The more experienced your heart is in practicing unconditional love, the more incoming information will be meaningful to you. There is a direct relationship between your heart and your understanding. If it is knowledge you seek, then open your heart to get the answer. To learn the maximum amount of understandable information, we simply ask the question with no bias. The question that reflects no bias is, higher self, what is going on? I suggest you use this formula every time something happens that defies the rules of reality. It is about free will. Until you have an open heart and establish a connection, your higher self does not care about you or interact with you. In fact, it is against cosmic law for your higher self to intervene. Higher self is not permitted to interact with you, unless by prior incarnation agreement or other special circumstance, until you decide you want to communicate with it. If your higher self initiated an interaction with you before you asked for it, then your higher self would be violating your free will. That, for your higher self, is not possible. Higher self communication into third dimension reality must be initiated by you. What about the people who spontaneously start getting information? This is generally by contract, and you may have pre-existing agreements with your higher self for something significant to open you to the higher self communication. Even those of you reading this may be able to pinpoint an event that started you in this direction. Communication in both directions. If you are studying with a piano teacher, she might decide you are ready for a difficult piece and purchase the music on your behalf to help you with it. If your teacher saw some music that she thought you would like, she might suggest that you explore it and offer guidance on playing it. When your communication with your higher self is reliable and consistent, the communication will begin to travel in both directions. Your higher self will begin to give you information that you may need and desire that perhaps you did not specifically ask for in the moment. The free flow of information occurs as you grow your connection to your higher self with your practice and devotion. In the next chapter, we will develop this newfound knowledge. If you are serious about developing a connection with your higher self that is virtually foolproof, you will choose to practice. You will choose to practice with questions that have no consequence to you. We will explore that in your commitment next. 5. Keeping your higher self connection. What you will learn in this chapter. Next steps in talking and listening to your higher self. How to practice your higher self connection to support living a fearless life. Once you reach a certain level of mastery, the only question to ever ask your higher self. Commitment time. If you already have a great higher self connection, a 6-week review and practice will still improve your connection from where it is today. Many successful actors and dancers continue to take classes long after achieving prominence. How will you know if you really need to practice? If you do not follow your inner guidance, higher self 100% of the time, you do not really trust it. You decide, here and now, that you will keep a practice period, like a trial period. Your trial period is a segment of time that you choose for yourself. It can be any length of time. It should be at least 45 days, 17 it could be longer. Make sure you make this decision at the ego level. This is to ensure that the decision is being made in a way that you are completely happy with your choice. I will refer to the practice period as being 6 weeks for the sake of discussion. Your practice period is 45 days or more. The exact length of time is for you to decide. Once you have established or received your signals or symbols from the higher self, it is time to make a commitment to continue to work with your higher self for a period of time. You are learning the language of the higher self and you need to get really good at it. If you were learning a foreign language, the first thing you might learn is yes and no, but you do not stop there. I am asking you to make a commitment of time to work with your higher self in practice. I want you to perfect your practice. Your higher self connection will be with you for the rest of your life. In the overall scheme of things, 6 weeks is a small investment. Choose your practice because it pleases you and you are willing to commit to the time. After you select a time frame, please assign a future date to it. This means that if today is the 15th of the month, and your practice period is for 6 weeks, you will name the first of the month 2 months hence. Specifically, if today is July 15th, your practice period will end on September 1st. If you breezed by the methods for connecting to the higher self in the previous chapter, this would be a good time to go back and review them before continuing. What kinds of questions will you ask during your practice period? This is one of the most critical sections on how to work with your higher self. You will choose questions that have no value to you and are of no consequence to you. These questions will be about things that you really do not care which way you do it. The reason you ask about insignificant things is because you do not want your ego to participate. Your ego has done a terrific job of getting you where you are today and it will not be able to resist participating on issues that matter to you. So give yourself a break from the ego and select questions that do not concern the ego. For example, you might ask, higher self, is it in my highest and best good to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? If you are meeting your best friend who always compliments how you look when wearing red, you probably would want to wear the red shirt, so it is not a good practice question. Ask questions about actions you are willing to complete. Make sure your practice period is loaded with questions you are willing to ask and follow through with, no matter what your higher self tells you. If you are unwilling to follow through with the higher self's answer, don't ask it. If you love chocolate chip cookies, don't ask your higher self about having one, because the temptation to eat one will be too great. You might decide to eat one and then later tell yourself, well, the no really was not a clear signal, and I really could not tell. You do not want to sabotage yourself, so do not ask higher self questions if you already prefer a certain outcome. If you ask your higher self a question and then decide not to follow through on the answer, you will be sabotaging your practice. During the practice period, please remember that if you ask your higher self, you must follow through. If you do not, you will interfere with your communication and defeat the purpose of your practice period, which is to develop this spectacular connection. Why is my ego eliminated in this equation? Your ego does not need you asking your higher self for things it is accustomed to handling for you, and will not easily relinquish the job of running your life. You are very likely getting great information from your guides and higher self already, but then your ego, which has managed all of this input for you in the past, gets in the middle and you begin to doubt and second guess. In fact, your ego may have been instrumental in influencing your buying and reading this book that led you to this point. Your ego wants you to be happy. Your ego wants you to get what you have determined is important, that is, information, knowledge, understanding, and more. Your ego collects its information from your lower self and the world around you. Imagine for a moment that your ego is a really good administrative assistant, or admin. Your admin does a wonderful job of making appointments, purchasing, organizing, setting up your business meetings, and managing your day. Your ego is like that. Next, imagine the reaction you would get if you told your admin you were going to handle all the appointments, purchasing, business meetings, and organizing and didn't need her anymore. The admin might ask, "Is there a problem with my performance? I have done a great job for you so far. Are you trying to eliminate me?" If, however, you told your admin you would start taking out the trash, she would reply, "Great. Take the one under my desk first since it gets filled the fastest." If you tell her you will start washing the windows, she will tell you that the ones in reception need it the most and to do those first. Why? She does not want those jobs anyway. Your ego will not resist your higher self communication by selecting things that don't matter to you, or your ego. This is an easy way to learn the language of the higher self. If you are a control freak and need to decide everything, then you will have to pay extra attention to this. For example, some people know exactly what they want to wear, exactly what they are going to eat, and manage even the most mundane details of their life with great precision. If this is you, decide now what you are willing to negotiate. Find out what you are willing to ask your higher self and then use that short list every day. Higher self, is it in my highest and best good to take this route to work? Avoid using, should I, and always use the formal. Higher self, is it in my highest and best good to use the Stairmaster now? Higher self, is it in my highest and best good to prepare green beans? Higher self, is it in my highest and best good to make spinach for dinner? Then sit back and watch the magic. Maybe you prefer to use the treadmill in the gym, but you get a yes when you ask about the Stairmaster. You get on the Stairmaster machine and watch someone else get on the treadmill. Your envy turns into appreciation when you see that the treadmill is not working. It was the same machine you would have used. Little by little the seeds of faith and knowing get planted. Within the practice period you've established, you will have enough synchronicity to know with great certainty the very real and tangible benefit of your higher self communication. At some point your ego is looking at all of these wonderful synchronicities and starts to see that you will get everything, happiness, knowledge, understanding, and so on, if you ask your higher self to decide. Full integration of the higher self. In reality you are integrating the ego into your higher self so that your higher self is expressing God's will. It is a powerful place to be so fully connected to your higher self that you are always operating from your fifth dimensional self, or 5D. We will explain 5D in chapter 12 of this book. Ultimately what you are doing is weaving the higher self and the ego together so that your ego wants what your higher self offers you, because the benefit is clear. Your practice period gives your ego the proof. I am not one of the teachers who believe the ego must be subdued. Instead, I believe the ego can be integrated into the higher self and vice versa, creating one will, God's will. Later, after your practice period is complete and your higher self connection is crystal clear, it is okay to not do what your higher self tells you. I am laughing as I write this, because when you test this out a few months from now, you will realize that once your higher self tells you any answer, you will regret not following it. You will probably choose not to follow your higher self only once. I only did this once and will write about what happened later in the book. I was sorry, too. Furthermore, in all cases that I know of, the higher self connection will always insist and persist if it is critical, so no worries there. Remember, if you do not think you can go either way regarding something your higher self tells you to do, then do not ask. This is a perfect indication that you have an attachment to the outcome and that it is not a good higher self question for you during your practice time. Belief. Asking why serves the ego. Belief involves understanding, which still relies on the ego. Beingness relies on knowingness. Trust will follow after you have blindly followed your higher self signals for 6 weeks. Your practice will develop confidence and that will lead to trust. It is about knowing that your higher self makes it possible for you to be in the moment. In the case of higher self questions, you choose to rely on the feedback you receive. This means you do not worry about whether you get immediate feedback about the choice and whether it was the perfect one or not. You will wait for some lovely synchronicity to give you feedback that shows the accuracy of your communication. For example, when you call a friend for lunch and he agrees to meet, you might ask where he wants to go. He does not care and offers, you pick, I chose last time. So you ask your higher self, which is in my highest and best good? Chinese? Pizza? You ask your higher self for each one, yes or no. Both answers should validate each other. Your higher self picks pizza, and while you are there you run into someone you had been trying to connect with for months. Here the universe is giving you the synchronicity and reinforcement that lets you know you are getting good information from your higher self. Remember, you must agree to follow whatever your higher self gives you during your practice period. If, during your practice period, you ask your higher self a question and then you decide not to follow it, you will sabotage your language skills. Forget keeping score. One man I worked with told me he was still having trouble with the higher self answers. I asked what kinds of questions he was asking and he said that he would ask his higher self if the traffic light in front of him would turn green before he got it. I remember laughing and saying, "You still care about the answer?" And he replied, "No, I really do not care if the light is red or green." And I replied, "Yes, but you are looking for immediate feedback that proves that you were right." He said, "No, I really do not care whether I get home 5 minutes later." As an engineer, he felt it was his responsibility to track his higher self's accuracy. What he is doing is keeping score. He thinks it is necessary in order to make sure the higher self is responding. He is an engineer and of course believes that he has to collect this data. While it is true you are to collect data, you must not seek immediate feedback. Instead, wait for synchronicity to provide the data to prove your higher self connection. If you practice basketball, you might stand in front of the basketball hoop, aiming and shooting dozens of times. At each opportunity, you would adjust your aim based upon the feedback of where the ball goes. If you look for this kind of immediate feedback with higher self practice, you are likely to dismiss the correct answers as lucky guesses, and the wrong ones with, "See, it doesn't work." If you keep looking for feedback to get the evidence that your higher self was right, you have not totally detached from the practice questions. The purpose of this exercise is to learn to allow your higher self to communicate, so that your ego will observe and conclude that this is a good thing. Ultimately, your goal is to incorporate your ego with your higher self so perfectly that the two become integrated into one will, God's will. Asking unimportant questions means you are not tracking the results. It is the very not tracking that produces the not caring attitude so very necessary to your success. As you let go of the need to evaluate or be right, your higher self will be able to give you enough evidence via the 50 or more daily questions that the results will be irrefutable. Instead of scorekeeping, let the synchronicities produce the score. Remember, it's important to choose questions for which you have no attachment to the outcome. Any sort of predictive question meant that the engineer would know instantly if his higher self was right or wrong. When he was right, he would compare it to all the wrong answers and conclude this whole higher self thing wasn't working. Again, scorekeeping isn't allowed during your practice period. Instead, let the synchronicities produce the score. I ask my higher self a question, but I never get an answer. If you do not get an answer to the question, "Is this my higher self telling me something?" consider the possibility that your higher self did not advise you like you think it did. Perhaps it is other forces within you. Be specific and confirm that it was your higher self giving you the answer. As a parent, have you ever heard a child answer to, "Who ate the last cookie in the cookie jar?" Of course not, no one will answer that question. The point is, if there is an entity in you urging you to take some action, or your lower self is wishing for some preferred outcome, you may think it is your higher self when it is not. When you ask the question, "Is this my higher self telling me to fill in the blank?" and you do not get your well-practiced yes signal, that is the answer. This lack of an affirmative signal is proof it is not your higher self leading you into this action. This is important to remember. The absence of a clear signal means it is not your higher self that was advising you in that moment. The only way to know for sure, especially when you are in a dilemma and really wondering, is to ask, "Is this my higher self telling me to do this?" Only your higher self is permitted to answer. This is cosmic law. If you are having trouble with this, try rebalancing your energy by asking your higher self to show you your yes signal, your no signal, and your neutral signal. This will neutralize the field. Then ask the question again. Please be very careful. Your higher self will never tell you to do something that is dishonest or immoral. Your higher self will never justify any action that would hurt another. If you are suspicious of an answer from your higher self, ask again. When in doubt, do without. How do you achieve proficiency? Promise yourself that you will keep this commitment to ask your higher self as many mundane, ordinary, unimportant, or insignificant questions you can think of each day during your 6-week trial. I suggest you ask practice questions 50 times or more each day. Your higher self will not mind. It is an investment in your future. What kinds of questions are considered mundane? Anything to which you do not have an attachment. What kinds of questions will you ask? Is it in my highest and best good to wear the red shirt or the blue one? Follow this route or that one to work? Skip dinner? Call someone now? Go to the gym today? Now? Take a break now or later? Prepare carrots or cucumbers for dinner? If your dinner guest loves carrots, you may already have decided on cooking carrots to please your guest. Just cook the carrots and do not ask during your 6-week trial. On the other hand, if you don't have a plan for dinner guests and you ask this question, and the response is to cook carrots, then do it. Then when the doorbell rings and the surprise visitor who ends up staying for dinner happens to love carrots, you can thank your higher self for knowing this before you started cooking. No exceptions. During this practice period, please refrain from asking your higher self questions that are exceptionally important. This is to make sure you are not jeopardizing your practice period with issues to which you are attached. If you need to make an important decision that is time sensitive and you need to use your higher self, please do. But this should be a rare exception. Kindly postpone every significant question you possibly can until your practice period has been completed. Learning the language of non-judgment. How do you learn this language? Ask your higher self to work with you in achieving this awareness. Although it is not natural by normal standards of mass consciousness, you can acquire it with practice. Approach it like any change of habits. Perhaps when you were younger you used slang words and now you don't because they do not give you the results you now want. It is a bit like that. If you have been in a class with me, you know we practice reframing judgmental statements. For example, If you ask your daughter to stop being mean to your house guests, you are actually locking her into that behavior by asking her not to do that. Instead, you might ask her to be kind to everyone who visits because that is how we do things in our house. Notice that this statement does not state your daughter's behavior is good or bad, it clearly conveys a different behavior is required. Neutral response. In the beginning of this higher self connection, I asked you to also ask your higher self for a signal for neutral. What does neutral mean? How can you use neutral? One of the easiest ways to reframe your judgmental statements is to begin to recognize polarity words that everyone uses and decide to stop using them in this way. It is easy to see polarity in the 5 reasons for neutral. 5 reasons for neutral. When your higher self gives you the neutral response to a yes or no question, you can use it to get more information. Neutral can mean one of 5 possibilities. There is no difference. Either answer will produce the same result. For example, you are at a fork in the road and your higher self can see that the fork merges before your destination, therefore there truly is no difference. Ambiguous question. Perhaps you have asked something like, will I marry Henry in September? What if you will get married to Henry but not in September? Or which September do you have in mind? It does not serve you to know. Sometimes you and your higher self know that you will act inappropriately if you know the answer. For example, if you ask if you will make your ascension in this lifetime, perhaps you will become overconfident and miss opportunities. This is called divine timing. It does not serve you to know now. This is also about divine timing and is similar to number 3 above. Sometimes it just does not need to be known now. For example, when you ask, will I pass the test tomorrow? And you might use that information to go out and party instead of studying, your higher self will give you the neutral response. Perhaps after you have studied and are ready for bed, the answer, when the question is asked again, will be yes. It is not in your stewardship. This means you do not have the right, you do not have the password. If you ask, is my neighbor pregnant? And get neutral, it is really not your affair. In polarity-based 3D we would say, it is none of your business. There is a very strong charge on this statement and it should help you begin to see the difference between polarity-based thinking and word choices versus unity thinking and non-polarity word choices. Knowing the 5 reasons for neutral will accelerate your understanding of the neutral response and your ability to discern your higher self information. To know this information. What is next after a neutral response? You can follow your neutral higher self response with a second question. Is it useful to pursue this further? If the answer is yes, you can begin to see one of 2 possibilities. Either there is no difference or your question is ambiguous and needs clarity. You may now proceed to know more. If your answer to the question is it useful to pursue this is no, then you should drop the whole line of questioning. It is very important to understand that your higher self is not giving permission. When you ask your higher self a question, you are developing a relationship with the version of you that is fully connected to God. This is akin to asking about what will put you in alignment with who you are at your highest level of evolution. Your higher self knows this and will always answer with this in mind. Your higher self never corrects you or tells you that you are wrong. Being wrong is completely impossible in the 5th dimension. In 5th dimension, the only choice is a God-centered choice, and the not God choice does not exist. So in 5D, your response to any situation is always a good one. As you become more and more your 5th dimensional self, this type of polarity thinking does not occur to you. You have full awareness of your God connection, which makes choices that align with that God connection. Open-ended questions are for after your practice period. Open-ended questions are questions that could have any answer. Typically, they are the opposite of yes, no questions. You can ask your higher self any open-ended question. Who did that? When will my son understand? Why is such and such happening? One time I asked my higher self why my van was making a certain noise and surprised even myself with the precise answer that I had no reason to know or understand. Developing mastery with certain kinds of questions. I discourage you from asking your higher self questions so you can make a decision about something. This is because you are using your mind to draw information from your higher self, whereas your higher self might actually have information that you failed to ask to reach a different conclusion. It is the last question you ask. It is more appropriate to ask your higher self what you should do in a situation. For example, instead of asking your higher self if someone you do not care to see is going to be at a party so you can decide whether or not to attend, you could ask if it is in your highest and best good to be at that party. It is never advisable to ask your higher self about a situation and then make a decision. That action is ego-driven. At a certain level, your higher self will start giving you unsolicited information. This is the ultimate. If you develop a rapport with an expert who lives near you, at some point in the friendship the person will offer information you have not requested. Why? Because the friendship and connection imply your interest in his advice. Actively soliciting your higher self many times during your practice period will open the gate and keep it wide open for information to flow freely in both directions. The logical reason for following your higher self. I always followed my higher self, knowing it is worthwhile. However, I desired to provide proof for those who were new to this arena. Knowing versus trusting the higher self could make a huge difference in deciding to always follow your higher self. For months I meditated on this question. I was obsessed with finding a logical reason to follow higher self unwaveringly. I understood this question would be useful to type of personalities. I knew many individuals would benefit from a logical reason for always following your higher self. One morning the answer arrived as I was coming out of the dream time. I was seeing a local weather report as it interrupted a movie on TV. Why do we listen to this interruption? Logic tells us that when a weather report interrupts local programming there is an impending change in the weather. It tells us this situation that appears normal is about to change drastically. It is a warning to take action now. If hail is suddenly expected, you may want to put your car in the garage. Once your higher self communication is strong and flowing easily in both directions, the logical reason to always follow your higher self is that your higher self will communicate with you in advance of when you need to know or do something. Having this advanced notice system that is always turned on and communicating with you allows you to quell the voice of logic that may be telling you something different. This is because your higher self is providing you with an interruption of local normal, with an update to inform you that things are not normal as they appear. Once you commit to always follow your higher self, it will be second nature for you to follow through. Learning the difference between third dimension and fifth dimension. Certain kinds of open-ended questions elicit more information than others. Open-ended questions may still hold expectations that would translate to their being third-dimensional questions. These questions ultimately are still polarity-based. Why? This is because they are based on limited thinking instead of possibility thinking. They are looking for an answer so you can take an action or understand something. Third-dimensional thinking seeks understanding so that the ego can act. Fifth-dimensional is not thinking, it is knowing. Where did my stuff go? Is looking for a place to go to retrieve it. When will my husband understand me? Asks how long I have to wait. Who is responsible? Helps me know who to blame. Why did that happen? Helps me to understand or change the situation so it will not happen again. In all cases, these questions use the higher self in a limited way because we then take an ego-based action after we get the polarity-based information. Missing objects. Save yourself hundreds of hours of effort by understanding this simple principle. Over the years I asked more and more questions of my higher self. I paid close attention to things that happened that defied the rules we believe are supposed to govern our everyday activities. I began to notice that objects would disappear. Occasionally they would reappear. In my frustration, I would complain, where did my stuff go? The answer was always the same, it is in the higher dimension. This happened frequently enough to make me begin teaching participants in my workshops how to handle this if it was happening to them. They all reported it was, so I taught them what I had learned. I discovered I could ask for my object to return from the higher dimension. I would state, if my object is in the fourth dimension, I would like it back. Thank you very much. You can, too. Your belongings didn't move to another location, they were there all the time, yet you couldn't see them in your third-dimensional state. One day in Asheville, North Carolina, I had a class where a builder who owned his own contracting business complained that his wife had lost her cell phone. He said she'd lost it 4 months prior and was sure she'd lost it in his truck. They took everything out, seats, carpet, and tools, looking for that missing phone. In the end, he gave her his cell phone and purchased a new one. He asked, "What do you say to get something to come back?" I gave him the exact words. If my wife's cell phone is in a higher dimension, I would like it back now. Thank you. He repeated this after me and added with emphasis, I'm driving to take us to lunch today. At the lunch break he opened the driver's side door of his cab. I opened the passenger side just as quickly. We both wanted to see what would happen. He reached in under the seat and pulled out his wife's missing cell phone. He looked at me as he said, if this hadn't happened to me personally, I would not have believed you. Start asking your higher self how much you are loved. This is so powerful and so significant that I recommend you ask this of your higher self every single day. Higher self, show me how much I am loved. It is especially important when you are working at the pioneering level clearing out painful emotional issues, no matter what the subject or venue. I put these heart instructions on my Merkaba 2 CD. 18 This along with the Hather toning gives you a leg up on doing the meditation by yourself. Add this to your daily practice and watch your heart heal in ways you did not even know were needed. This request is to help you grow your self-love and develop trust with your higher self. It is not typically answered with words that invite you to take action, thus it is not breaking the 45-day rule. In my advanced workshops we have had many examples of what happens to individuals when they ask this question, and I would like to share a few. A doctor who asked her higher self to tell her how much she was loved saw a beautiful pink rose, then several roses, and then hundreds of roses, and the colors kept increasing, finally representing the entire spectrum of the rainbow. In the spaces between roses the light began to glow, gradually getting brighter and brighter. The whole thing gave her a feeling of soft, nurturing support. Peter, an engineer, wrote to me saying, I think I have my higher self answers for yes, no, and maybe, but I do not know what good it does me since the responses are unpredictable and unreliable, at least with the testing I am doing. That is why I have not done more along these lines. Unpredictability and unreliability force me to put it on a shelf to troubleshoot some time when life allows. The testing I am doing is picking questions that are not consequential and to which I do not know the answer, but I can verify. The only type one can think of now are of a predictive nature. For example, will that streetlight be green when I arrive? Or, will I have a message on my phone when I get back to it? The problem with other types of questions such as, should I have chocolate or vanilla? Is verification. For example, how would anyone check if one is the right answer? Do you have suggestions on the testing and development of a higher self dialogue such as we discussed? My answer signals were ideas that came to me during some afternoon pondering rather than in the moment of meditation. Of course, I checked out the answers in meditation and they seem to be confirmed, but I always have so much uncertainty about these kinds of things. That is why my attitude about such spiritual matters has developed to where I say let it make itself known unmistakably. If it takes a burning bush, then that is the way it is, and I make no apologies or excuses for that. I have made approaches the best way that I know. Then with a definite, obvious answer, I do not always have to drift with all this constant uncertainty. I am sorry about the tone of this note and if I missed some advice you may have given me. If you have any suggestions, I would be very grateful to hear them. Please note that his answer signals were ideas that came to him after the afternoon of pondering and not during his meditation. It can often happen that way when you are trying too hard. When you are determined to make your higher self connection clear, the answers will find their way into your awareness, but not necessarily during the actual meditation. This same person goes on to say that he checked out the answers in meditation and they seem to be confirmed. The important thing is to not try to make these concepts work. Be gentle with yourself and find your way. My answer: your questions are insightful. Your experience of yes and no signals is also clear. It is always perfectly okay to assign values for the yes and no signals. The higher self will work with whatever you wish as long as you are consistent. Your intent to get communication from the higher self must be built on your intention to practice without polarity judgment or keeping score. If you ask only questions that are verifiable, you are still attached to the outcome and ultimately not trusting. What is happening is the ego is still attached to how things work out instead of unquestioningly accepting the incoming information. By forcing yourself to ask only questions you can verify later, you still have judgment and attachment and are seriously limiting your practice. Some information will be verifiable, like what restaurant do we go to tonight? While in the restaurant you discover they have your favorite food that you did not know was on the menu. Other kinds of verification will pleasantly surprise you after the fact. Some will not show up at all. They will just be practice and blind faith, not caring, just practicing. If you ask what shirt to wear and you really do not care, but you could have worn a favorite white shirt that might have gotten ketchup all over it that day, you may see in hindsight the merit of asking your higher self. And you saved your favorite white shirt by asking your higher self. Your higher self is fifth dimensional where there is no polarity. Your higher self is non-judgmental. Therefore, when you judge the answers, you are placing a third dimensional interpretation on your higher self by placing limitation on information that is coming from your higher self. Stop seeing it through the lens of judgment or the lens of the ego and instead allow your experiences to teach you or show you during your practice period all the way through to non-judgment. You must begin to ask questions that are truly non-judgmental. You do not care if you can verify at the ego level or any other level. The verification will percolate up from within the environment, from sources inside and outside you. I call them synchronicities. Just as the marksman continues to increase the range of difficulty, you can now increase the level of difficulty in your non-attached questions to include non-attachment as to how they are verified. Notice that when he was trying to get higher self signals it did not work for him, yet later when he was not working on it so intensely, in they came. His clear intent allowed that to occur. If you are like this engineer, Peter, and have a very logical way of thinking and adapting to change, you will need to allow yourself the space and let go of data collection first. This means you must allow your higher self to communicate with you, without your usual record keeping. You must lighten up your scientific thinking into a more playful approach. This is one of the reasons the Kahuna tradition says you must be like a child. It will give you the breathing room necessary for your higher self to shine. As your practice develops, you will notice the value of the higher self connection. Challenge your desire to evaluate this before your 45 days of practice, and let the evidence weigh in at the end of the experiment. This specific practice, as detailed here, will enable you to achieve 100% accuracy with your higher self. Advanced questions after your practice period is complete. These questions are for after 45 days from your start date. What if I ask my higher self about something and then decide I don't want to do it? Your higher self will not correct you or save you from your mistakes. Your higher self does not sit in judgment of your activities or decide you were wrong or bad because you asked a higher self question and then did not respond. Do you remember the story about Ginny, the woman with a black belt in martial arts who decided not to take the first exit? As she discovered, if you do not follow your higher self, you will regret it. One time I did not follow my higher self and regretted it later. While teaching in New York, I proposed getting together with some dear friends who lived there. The only night I had available, they had already made plans to see a movie. I checked in to see if I was supposed to see the movie. Nope. I really wanted to see my friends, so against the answer my higher self had given me, I went to the movie anyway, just so I could be with my friends. The movie was so bad I wanted to walk out. They thought the same thing. None of us wanted to be there, but all of us suffered through that awful movie out of concern for hurting the other's feelings. What a waste. Now I know better. I can promise you that if you ask your higher self, you will get the best answer that will please every aspect of you, even the ones you don't usually consider. Your ego might not think so in the moment, but hindsight is a great teacher. Your higher self has all your priorities and aspects in full view and is giving you an informed answer. The answer is the exact answer you would give yourself if you knew everything, and your higher self does. Become the humble servant. Become the fool to spirit. Give yourself permission to hear what is going on. Once you have learned to step out of judgment, you will be open to the messages of the universe all the time. The daily practice of the Merkaba will clear your judgments, wounds, and fears. Get in the habit of asking in this non-judgmental way, what is going on? You will be amazed at the answers that will start coming. The universe rearranges itself to accommodate your picture of reality. What fascinates you? This is what the universe works on. The goal then becomes being a master of divine expression. It means no limitation. We are not locked into physical reality. We are becoming light from within. We are no longer looking to an outside authority. Remember, what do you do when something happens that defies explanation? Ask your higher self, what is going on? After your practice period, you may start asking this and other open-ended questions. Steps for initiating and keeping your higher self connection. Step 1. Establish clear communication. Do it this way. Invite your higher self. While in meditation at breath 14, say, Higher self, I am choosing to be in my heart. Please join me in my heart. I am making a commitment to be in my heart, and I am asking that you assist me with my communication with you. Please clarify or give me a signal for yes. Wait for the response. Please give me a signal for no. Wait for the response. Please give me a signal for neutral. Wait for the response. Step 2. Continue the practice for a minimum of 6 weeks. Do it this way. 3 agreements with your higher self for your practice period. Do your practice period for a minimum of 45 days. Ask questions. Ask only yes or no questions. No open-ended questions. Ask unimportant, insignificant questions throughout the day as often as 30 to 50 times. Do not ask predictive questions that invite your ego to track your progress. If you are tracking your progress, you still care about the outcome. Also, do not ask important questions. If you absolutely cannot defer asking a specific question until after your practice period, then make a rare exception. Take action. Always follow through on your answer from your higher self. No exceptions. Avoid other divination tools. Do not use any forms of divination during your practice period, such as kinesiology, muscle testing, finger testing, cards, or pendulums. You are only asking your higher self during this practice period. Your job during the practice period is to keep your ego out of the action and use passive positive feedback to reinforce your signals. Step 3. Make a commitment to your practice period. When you are ready to commit to your higher self, during your next Merkaba meditation, you will tell your higher self you are making a commitment to work with your higher self, and you are asking your higher self to work with you in return. You name the length of time and the date, such as June 1st, your practice period will end. You thank your higher self for working with you. Step 4. Feel higher self-love for you. At each subsequent meditation, during the pause between breaths 14 and 15, ask your higher self to show you how much you are loved. 6. Programming your Merkaba. What you will learn in this chapter. Beginning programming. Programming 101. Programming your Merkaba. House rules for writing programs for your Merkaba. Basic programs to put in your Merkaba. Daily programs. The Merkaba is not used for protection. Those of us with a Midwestern accent think everyone else has an accent, not us. I made a similar assumption about programming and integrity, polarity issues. In the early years I thought everyone experienced the Merkaba the way that I did. What I discovered is that people experience the Merkaba through their own templates of polarity. What I knew instinctively as appropriate behavior with the Merkaba was not easily translated. Even Drunvalo assumed all the facilitators would understand the Merkaba at a certain level and take it to the next level. I found people would make mistakes and assumptions based upon our unique worldview, which is predicated on our own beliefs and childhood environment. This chapter is devoted to programming based on years and years of practice. Programming your Merkaba. Your light body and Merkaba are interchangeable terms. Many do not realize your Merkaba is alive. When I first studied the Merkaba I saw it as mechanistic, like Sir Isaac Newton's machine model of the time, moving like a clock. Scientists now believe this is not the only model. One day my Merkaba started dancing in the middle of the meditation. I suddenly realized it was alive and responding to me. I called my facilitator and said, "Jeffrey,